Hi, I'm Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this is Patient. My guest today, I am so excited to talk to her. She is I think, seven-time New York Times bestselling author. Pretty impressive. It's it's you and Stephen King, I guess. Her books about the astonishing, funny, mysterious world of the human body include Stiff, Spook, Gulp, Bonk, Grunt, and Fuzz, and Pecking for Mars. Her new book actually has a two-word title this time around. It's called Replaceable You, Adventures in Human Anatomy. Mary, thank you so much for joining me. I had such pleasure reading this book over the last couple of weeks. It's been a real joy. It feels to me, if someone said this is classic Mary Roach, I think we would know what that means at this point. It's classic Mary Roach. I want to ask you about this, which is great, right? Give us more of what we love. I want to ask you about the subject matter because it is unique. We're all, I think, sailing into our ship of Theseus eras in our own lives, right? In many ways. What was it that drew you to this particular subject matter at this point in your own life?
Well, I'm 66, so everything is starting to wear out. So that, I think that was probably part of it. But like you said, I'm always playing around the terrain of the human body. And so in some ways it's a very kind of obvious topic for me. But I think what the thing that kind of got me rolling in terms of being able to see some of the places I might go, because I like to go and report on the scene and meet people and see things and sort of set a picture for the reader. And I'd heard from one of my readers wrote to me and said, "Oh, well, she actually thought I should be writing about pro football referees. I don't know why, but which isn't a good fit for me." But in our conversation, she said she told me she's an amputee, specifically an elective amputee, and so in other words, somebody who had a part, her foot, which was underperforming. She'd had multiple operations. She's had spina bifida, and the foot was twisted. And she would see people with a prosthetic foot or lower leg hiking, running, doing things that she herself couldn't do easily. So, and she thought, why can't I have that? Like, why can't somebody cut off my foot? And why can't I have a prosthetic foot? Because she had tried to find surgeons to do this, and they were reluctant. It took her a long time to find a surgeon who would agree to amputate because it was a healthy foot. She's like, yeah, but I can't walk on it. So I thought that was fascinating. It kind of gets at the whole idea of wholeness, this kind of bias for wholeness that we all have. And just and from there a couple other things popped up, and this always happens with me. I find a few sort of nuggets that I think then what would be the umbrella topic, and replacing bits and pieces of the body just seemed like there'd be lots of terrain to poke around in and learn about and travel places. So I like those broad topics. It's certainly a very broad topic because you can try to replace just about any part of the human body, and people have.
As
So
we
there's,
see,
yeah,
as
yeah,
we see in it. Mary, I love that you just quote it yourself and you quoted one of the lines that I highlighted, the bias for wholeness. That
yeah,
feeling that we have. And I think this book really explores so much of that tension, that feeling of that impulse that we have, that desire we have for completeness, and yet also then what does that look like? Because one of the things that surprised me the most that you kick off the book with is talking about the way that people don't necessarily use their replacement parts. They don't use the dentures. They don't necessarily use their prosthetic limbs. They don't necessarily use their artificial vaginas. They don't use them, or at least they don't use them in the way that one would conventionally use the part that they may have been born with or
right.
wanted to transition to. Talk to me about that because that kind of blew my mind a little about what that says about our adaptability.
Sure. Yeah. I think the idea with the artificial vagina was interesting. This is something that's not it's done sometimes with trans women. If the more traditional technique hasn't worked for whatever reason, you can recruit part of the intestine to serve as a vagina. And it's moist, it's tubular, it's very agreeable, it'll do the job. But what was interesting was that the surgeon who, Maurice Garcia, who is the director of the Cedar Sinai Transgender Health and Surgery Center, he talked about how he made sure to tell these women there's an option here to just do vulvoplasty. I mean, if what is troubling to you is looking down and seeing parts that don't feel like you, we can fix that. Um, and and then the vaginoplasty is a little more complicated, and you may not that. If penetration isn't something that you're that concerned with, or you don't have partners, or what, that may not be something that you want. And that is the case sometimes, that trans women would just opt for the vulvoplasty. And he talked about how surgeons, he was confronted at a conference by surgeons saying, "I can't believe you would do that," as though kind of like, I guess because they were male cisgender surgeons, like, how could you be a woman and not care about penetration? It was, and it just was an interesting conversation to have. And what was the other example you mentioned?
Oh, the dentures
Oh,
and the
yes,
prosthetic
yes.
limbs,
Yeah.
like you start I think
The,
it is very intentional that you start the book with dentures and you start the book with these stories of people who have worn dentures, but they don't use them to eat. They don't even want to use them to kiss. It's about what we want to present. I think all of that is about what we want to present aesthetically to the world, this bias for quote unquote wholeness. But
right.
what do we really need? What's really
Exactly.
necessary to feel
Exactly.
whole inside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, there was in the 1700s, 1800s, um, dentures they were essentially like wigs for the mouth. You would put them in and you would look more quote unquote normal. You would look like you had teeth, and socially that felt good, but they were useless for eating. They to the point where people would use this device called a masticator, and they would, which is a handheld chewing mechanism, and then they would kind of spoon the food into their mouths. But my father, I wrote in the book, my father, he lost all of his molars. I don't know when, but he was 65 when I was born. So as long as I knew him, he didn't have much going on back there. He just had the front. He chewed everything, including my mom's overcooked lamb chops and everything else that she would present. He chewed it just fine with his front teeth. And I think at the time, because dentures at the time were just held in place with that polygrip type adhesive, I would imagine he probably did better than some of those folks who had the full plates of dentures. I mean, his smile may not have been as pretty, but he's like, you know what, I'm doing fine.
I think in the book you refer to it as beavering.
My brother, yes, my brother's term for what my father did, yeah, just sort of like that, chewing with the, and he got used to it, and I was used to seeing him do it, and I don't know, it worked for him.
Right. I mean, this is a book to me that is very much about accommodation, about the how we accommodate the changes that we all
Yeah,
go through and what that means and how far we want to go because now we are at this moment where we can go very, very, very far. And you talk about how lucrative this is. You talk about the skin graft business and what a big business it is, and all of the ethical questions that arise around that. This book talks about, I love the chapter on stomas, about the empathy that we are, I think, developing for people who look different and for saying, maybe I don't want an artificial limb, or maybe I don't want that skin graft. Maybe I don't want these really painful procedures or processes. And yet at the same time, the industry is really never been better. How do we reconcile that as people in our own bodies where there is the drive to sort of say, like, I'm okay with whatever I've got. Maybe I'm missing a part now. Maybe it's different
yeah,
now. And I am getting deluged with pressure from
Yeah,
capitalism, right?
yeah,
To consume.
yeah. I think what has helped with particularly you mentioned stoma. So with ostomy, whether it's colostomy or ileostomy, if somebody has a pouch, I think what's been great in one thing about social media that has been great is people being very transparent, just saying, look, this is my pouch, my bag, and this is how it works. And there are models and athletes and a lot of people just being very out there, which is I think how you start to break down the stigma and also how you start to raise awareness about options. And like one other thing in the book I mentioned was um, with mastectomy, for a long time, there were surgeons who didn't really present going flat as an option or just, having one breast or whatever, depending on the case. It was just sort of part of the package that you would then move on to reconstruction. But why? If you're fine with just going flat, you're not going to need all these surgeries. There's a lot of complications that arise with those reconstructive surgeries. And that part of it has been Facebook groups. The comedian Tig Notaro, who did a whole stand-up routine, part of it with her shirt off, and she is recovering, has recovered from mastectomy and breast cancer. So just the more people are open and on, especially in platforms like TikTok or Instagram, it just normalizes things. So that's been, I think, really helpful. I think it's just the more it's out there, the more everyday it is, and it starts to become normal.
Right.
Yeah,
And as you said, it's about options. It's about, yes, we have more and more options than ever before, whether it's for prosthetic limbs or whether it's for reconstructive surgery, but we also have the option of maybe saying no. And as you point out in the book, and as you're talking about breast reconstruction or gender confirmation surgery, you also talk about, you say that like when the options are only being created by cis male surgeons, we wind up with problems. And you talk about that with gender confirmation with penile work, that the drive to go wider has, has been kind of a problem
yeah,
in gender reassignment. Girth is an issue that
yeah, right.
why would anyone not want the widest possible option?
Yeah, the surgeon that I spent time with from the Cedar Sinai um, Transgender Surgery and Health Center, he said he's done a few surgeries, neophallus reductions, because the patient comes to him and says, "Look, I didn't ask for a penis this big. The surgeon did it." I mean, I think there are cases where the patient himself had requested something on the large size, but there were also cases where like he's as Dr. Garcia put it, the surgeon sort of patted himself on the back, like, "Look at this one. Look how big that is." So and the patient's partners were like, "You're too big. This is uncomfortable."
The circumference, like just think about where it's going and start work your way backwards from
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah, and
Maybe
yeah, exactly. And he had done he had a paper where he went into good vibrations and also looked at the sales of the different sizes of dildos, basically. And he's like, beyond, I forget the exact number, beyond that measurement, which was the best seller, there's very few sales, way out there in the extreme. That's not something partners want.
no,
Yeah,
no, no.
yeah,
There's limits to how much
yeah,
anyone wants going in that direction.
exactly.
Mary, I mean, that whole part of the book, so much of the book, it's just so funny. There's so much in your writing that is so funny. And the way that you kind of always kind of sidebar to go like, that's a funny name for a surgeon, or this made me look at this, or the way that you do that consistently throughout your work. I think is very telling and I think is very probably strategic on your part. You're very, very funny, but it feels like a way into these topics about sex and death and our colons that otherwise are hard for us to look directly at. Why is that? a strategy of yours, Mary.
I guess when I first started out, my first book was about cadaver research. It was called Stiff, and I think it was just I for many years had written magazine pieces, and I really wanted to do a book, but I had this sense that everything had been written about, and then I stumbled onto the proceedings of the STAP car crash conference in the basement of the UCSF Medical School library. I was really just poking around, like, what can I write a book about? And I found that, and I thought, okay, I've not seen any book about cadavers, kind of like useful and productive post-mortem careers. That seemed, and because I think of the taboo that surrounds writing about death. So it was really just me going like, I'll take that one. Nobody's doing that. I got it. I got it. And I guess for whatever reason, I'm comfortable asking questions that might seem, I don't know, overly curious. I don't know. Uh, it's fun. It's fun for me to wander into these realms I know nothing about. And I didn't plan it. Uh, I didn't plan to try to break down taboos, but I think that it turns out to be a healthy thing to do. I think whether it's sex or death, or even in this current book, some of the surgeries that are out there. I think it's speaking about these things in a straightforward, even funny way. It just diffuses it. It takes the kind of the electricity away from it, and it just becomes, it's like this, let's just talk about this. It's part of life. This is part of life. And why are we not discussing it? And why not? I mean, I find that humor, I don't know, there are very few places where humor can't go.
Yeah, and these meat suits that we walk around are funny.
They are.
They're just really humbling all the time. They're just always humbling us. You know, this book is very funny, but it's also there are parts of it that are so poignant, and the chapter about iron lungs in particular, I felt was so moving, so deep. And when you realize that the last man in an iron lung died just last year, that part of our history is still so recent, and it feels
Yep.
like we are forgetting it like that now, Mary.
Yep.
And when you
Yep.
see polio's back, I wonder what you
Yep.
as a science writer and as someone who has the ear of and is listening to people in medical research, we are galloping forward at a breakneck pace that is very exciting in research. And we are also hurtling backwards in an almost equally aggressive way. What do you think that says about where we are in terms of research? And what do the people that you talk to, what are they saying about all of this? I mean, if you're someone who's worked all your life in like
Yep.
polio and now polio's back.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. When this book um, was going into production, and it was the last chance I had to make changes to the manuscript. I wrote to a number of the researchers whose labs I had visited, and I said, um, this Doge was just happening, and the funding, big cuts in funding to the sciences were all over the news. And I wrote to people to just see, what's happening. Is your lab in peril? Are you having funding cuts? And at that point, it was people saying, we really aren't sure where this is going to go, but it's terrifying. And I asked one of them, and he didn't want his name used, but I like what he said. I actually have it here. It's not, I don't think it's in the epilogue, but he said the cuts in funding at the NIH will stop new innovations in their tracks, destroy the pipeline of the next generation of scientists, engineers, and innovators, and cripple the US's global competitiveness in technology by dismantling both the innovation engine and the workforce needed. And so it wasn't, it's just the big picture was kind of shocking, not just, and then like the smaller picture was there were folks who had multi-year contracts to do research, contracts that had been signed, and subjects who'd been recruited for long-term studies, unsure if their budget was going to be slashed. And what happens then? Not just to those patients, but to the patients that would have been helped by this science. So it just comes down to politics, plain and simple. That,
Yeah.
that politics is determining what scientists and medical professionals are able to do is just so depressing.
It's depressing and it's to me as a patient uncanny when I think about the people who are going to be affected by these changes now aren't even sick yet.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Haven't even been in that accident yet. The
yeah,
the people who are going to be so hurt don't even know today how
yeah,
hurt they're going to be.
yeah.
That's, I think, the galling part of all of this. For you as a science writer, I'm curious what this means, where you want to go next in the subjects that you cover, knowing that we are in a very different climate of research, innovation, curiosity, Mary, just
Yeah.
curiosity.
Well, hopefully, they can't stop curiosity.
They're
I
trying.
defy them.
They're trying.
They're trying. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to keep doing what I do. I do. Uh, I feel like it's more important now to write about science in a way that is engaging and that kind of welcomes people and sort of shows them this is what scientists and medical professionals do. This is who they are. This is they're human beings and they're really dedicated and they do amazing work and their creativity and dedication is something we should be applauding and funding. Why would we be putting hurdles in their way? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. And in this book, you show us these characters. These aren't just abstract ideas about science. These are these characters that you get to meet and you go all around the world talking to and you see their own personal stories and what drives them. It's got to be profoundly humbling. And you get to do things, Mary. You in this book, a beating heart in your own hand. You go on a colon walk with an empty empathy bag. Now I'm going to start using the phrase my empathy bag is empty too. I mean, this is really amazing stuff. How does that change you as a person? How has this career of looking at death and sex and what goes on in our guts and excretion and now our replaceability, the tension of at what point do we become human or less human? How does that affect how you feel now? As you said, a woman in your 60s. How does it make you feel about mortality and all of it?
um, I guess particularly this book and Gulp, which was about the alimentary canal, everything between the nose and the butt. Um, I think over and over, I'm just kind of walloped by how amazing and complicated the human body is. Even something like stretch receptors, like that this is how your body tells you it's time to take a dump, like because you don't even really think like how is it that it's communicating that? It's like, well, these stretch receptors when they when things are full, it just sends this message to your brain like, okay, time for you
Right.
to find a toilet, like that kind of, just like I don't know, I had never heard of stretch receptors, and all of a sudden I was like, God, thank God for that, those stretch
Right.
receptors and the
Because,
rectum. Thank
right.
It's like if we didn't have it, we just have to kind of stop and go whenever there's enough stuff in there. And
And that's why I think the stoma chapter is so fascinating. It's just, yeah, you don't think about what's keeping your poop in and when it's coming out until you really need to think about those things. But
right,
we're all
right,
we're all at the mercy of it though, in the same way though, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think the more that the as I've kind of gone through all of these topics in these books, um, I'm just ever more kind of amazed at all the stuff that I and probably all of us take for granted that's going on behind the scenes. We're kind of like a play, like a one person show. You're out there and that's what the audience sees. But behind the curtain, there are lighting people and there are props people and everybody kind of scurrying around and making it happen. And there's just infinite amounts of that going on. in everybody's body. And we're just on it. We just take it for granted because if it's going well and doing what it should be doing, you're not even aware of it. And that's just astounding.
I don't think it is a spoiler to say that one of the beautiful takeaways of this book is that observation you make that as much as we have now at our fingertips to replace different parts of ourselves, you really cannot replicate any anything that we do. That it
Right.
is just we can't quite replicate it. We
No.
can create all of these amazing facsimiles that can really change people's lives, but we can't replicate it. And that is really awe-inspiring. Mary, I want to ask you one more quick question because I would be remiss if I didn't. Is there anything that you came upon or you thought you wanted to do in this book that you didn't get to do or you had to leave out? Because I feel like I want to get that little like bonus content that you read this book,
Yeah.
but maybe you didn't get this part.
Yes, yes, yes. There are a couple things. I wanted to have a chapter on uterus transplants because that is a you don't hear a lot about. I had not been aware that this was an option, and it's interesting because it's a temporary transplant. So it could either be from a cadaver or from a woman who's had all the children she's going to have and wants to donate. And so the uterus can be implanted for the duration of the pregnancy. The child can be delivered, and then the uterus is removed, that thereby meaning that you don't have to be on immunosuppression for your whole life. So all of the sort of downsides of a transplant, the fact that you have to suppress the immune system for the body to accept this piece that you've put in it, that's gone after the child is born. So I thought that was pretty cool. There are a number of schools that are and facilities that are doing this, but none of them would respond to me. And I don't know why. I'm not sure why. And for me, I need a setting and a scene and people. And yeah, so I wanted to be there either for the transplant, for the implantation, or for the birth, or for, I mean, there were so many things that, potentially that I could have been there for, but um, nobody wanted that. Uh, and there have been some changes lately in legal issues with patient privacy, and I think universities and medical centers are less accommodating than they used to be. I mean, there are always folks who are willing to work around that and welcome you to their facility, but the uterus transplant people were not. Um,
It's a fascinating subject. A friend of mine actually wrote a story about that, and I will be linking to it in the show notes because it is absolutely
was
mind-blowing
was this for the
subject.
Times? There was a piece, I think, in the New York Times Magazine about uterus transplants.
There was a piece in Salon too. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty mind-blowing stuff. Yeah. So yeah. All right. So well, we'll get you on it for maybe a future book. But in the meantime, the new one out this week is Replaceable You. It's absolutely fascinating. If it's your first Mary Roach book, you're going to want to read all of them. And if you've read all of them, you're going to get exactly what you came for. It is a delight. Mary, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Mary Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me on, and good luck with the podcast and everything else.